Howdy, Space Cowboys. My name is Ricky, and, well, there's been some pretty massive news in the world of Dungeons & Dragons when it comes to their open game license. You might ask, why am I talking about news for a tabletop RPG on a game dev channel? Well, I'll tell you why. For those of you that don't know, my game, Cosmic Renegade, is inspired by Dungeons & Dragons, specifically the SW5e mechanics for ship battles. Almost a month ago, this tweet sent the D&D community into an uproar over the leaked new updated terms of the open game license, which is a license that historically has allowed players, dungeon masters, and other creators to freely use Dungeons & Dragons rules and content for their own tabletop games. I imagine that people were most upset with the Wizards of the Coast, this is the company that owns Dungeons & Dragons, and by association Hasbro, for basically claiming complete control over anything you made under the new license terms. And for this, Wizards was dragged all over Twitter with the movement hashtag OpenDND. Last Friday, Wizards of the Coast announced that it would no longer be changing the OGL, and would even move their systems reference document to be licensed under Creative Commons. Now, people have been calling this a huge victory over an evil corporation, and I guess for the most part it is, but there are still some complications that third-party creators need to address. Especially if you're making a D&D style video game like I am. According to this video from Legal Eagle, which I highly recommend you check out, there is a key concept in here that a lot of people seem to miss during the whole thing, that actually works in favor of the good guys. And that is, you can't copyright ideas. Copyright protects forms of expression, not ideas, so think paintings, music, art, film. Trademarks, on the other hand, protects the identity of a business so that consumers aren't confused in the marketplace from where their goods and products come from. But what about game rules? No, neither can be used on the rules of the game itself, i.e. the game mechanics. That's just because game mechanics are a process. So what about patents, right? Can't you patent a process or an idea? Yes, but probably not game mechanics. So, I'm not a patent attorney by any means, but I did write my own provisional patent for something I made back in the day, and I don't think that you can patent game mechanics based on two reasons from US patent law. The first is, D&D rules probably wouldn't pass novelty requirements, especially today. I mean, the game has been out for a while, which means it's public domain. Secondly, it probably won't pass the obviousness requirement. If a person of ordinary skill, whatever that means in this context, in the relevant field of technology, Dungeons & Dragons I guess, would have thought of it as obvious, then it won't pass that requirement. And with all the players out there who think they're rules lawyers, I mean, it probably won't. So we've established that game rules and mechanics can't be copyrighted, trademarked, or patented. So, am I safe to make my game? Unfortunately, there are even more complications. Earlier today, I hopped on Reddit to see how SW5e was affected by the whole open game license thing. The consensus seems to be that SW5e falls under something called the fan content policy, because it's free content, instead of the OGL. And after reading it and some more Reddit comments, there are a few things that I noted. The first, the OGL does not, will not, has not, and won't continue to affect SW5e content. This is because SW5e is free content, and the OGL is really there to govern how third parties make profit from Dungeons & Dragons and other Wizards of the Coast content. Number 2, if anything, SW5e related content is way more in danger of the Disney IP inquisition than anything else. I mean, mercy upon anyone who dares challenge the mouse. Number 3, the fan content policy stresses that fan content must be free to share with the entire community and does not require the author's permission. So, would I even be able to sell my game if I made it? That answer really depends on $1 million question. Does Homebrew equal fan content? In other words, if I create an entirely new world with new species and characters that happens to use the same game mechanics, would that fall under fan content policy? If so, what about shows like Critical Role or Dimension 20? These are some of my favorite series to watch. They're homebrew, but they make a profit from streaming D&D. Are the rich, amazing worlds developed by the great Matthew Mercer and Brendan Lee Milligan technically fan content? Maybe not, but there are still more questions. To what degree can I use things like abilities and spells, right? These are part of the rules, but they definitely, I can see them being a form of expression in some ways. Like when I program them into a game, does that transform that original expression into my own expression? Does that count as novel? Or do I have to reflavor them with different appearances, names, and descriptions? Or do I just have to come up with entirely new systems? I posted all of this on Reddit to see if people would confirm any of my conclusions, and I'll comment on this video if it gets any updates from people hopefully more knowledgeable than me. That's a lot to say about Reddit though. In the meantime, I will just keep developing as per usual until I get a cease and desist order from Wizards or Disney or whatever. So if you want to try my game at least a few times before I get sued into submission by our corporate overlords, make sure you get on our demo waitlist. There's a link in the description, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. See you in space, cowboys. I love how I'm using Reddit as my de facto legal team on this issue. It's like as if me and a briefcase filled with like Reddit comments are going to put up like an Ace Attorney style defense against the big mouse himself. Man, it is a really good thing I'm doing this out of pure love. Otherwise I'd never risk this as an actual business, pursuit.